hopefully you had some fruitful discussions. Probably you grabbed some cold drinks for our plenary session now. The plenaries tonight, it's actually the first of this year's IFC. Work like that. We get some input first. It will be about half an hour, could be 25, could be 35 minutes, and then there will be a Q&A session. And as we did with the specials this afternoon, the first part is publicly streamed and the Q&A session isn't. That's only for registered delegates of the IFC, so we can discuss things probably a bit more openly. Please use the chat. Leslie and Adrian and Johannes are sitting down there. They're posting us some questions. If you have them, just post them and we'll make sure we will pass them along. It will be in total this session about 75 minutes. And tonight we talk about investigative research and research networks. Let's start in 2016. There was the Panama Papers about offshore shell corporations which were used for fraud or tax evasion. And at the heart was the Mossack Fonseca, that's a Panamanian law firm. This was made public after an anonymous source, a John Doe, approached a reporter of the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany. 2017, there was the Paradise Papers, confidential papers about offshore investments. These papers were leaked to 2 German reporters of Süddeutsche Zeitung, and they shared them with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. And then 2019, there was Ibiza Gate. At the heart of the story was a video of the former Vice Chancellor of Austria, Hans Christian Strache. The scandal became public, by the way, at the 17th of May, so not exactly, but relatively close, 2 years ago. And the video was leaked to 2 reporters of the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany. And these reporters are Bastian Obermayer and Frederik Obermayer, slightly different spelling, not relatives, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporters from Germany's Süddeutsche Zeitung. And how did they do all that? That they can tell us themselves, because they will be our guests tonight, and there they are. So good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
So the next half hour is yours.
Thank you. First of all, it's very sad to have this meeting via internet and not see us here in person in Cologne, but we will try to make our best out of that. 3 years ago, we received a very strange message. Someone had approached us with the message that there was material that showed that someone very high up in a European government seemed to be open for corruption. Would we want to see that? And we said, of course, yes, we want to see that. So we had to travel. We had to go to a city that we can't disclose now. And there we met in a hotel room very late at night. It was a Friday night, and it was around 10:40 or so. And we had to give away our phones, and the phones were stored in the bathroom. And we were patted down to see if we had any other devices. And then we went into the hotel room that was full of monitors and computers and all that stuff. And we very soon understood why, because they wanted to show us a video. The men who we met on that evening were highly nervous, and so were we. And the whole setting was like in a very bad movie, to be honest. Then those men, they told us that the country was Austria, and the person high up in the government was the then Vice Chancellor Hans Christian Strache, who is a very known right-wing populist. They also explained us that they had set a trap for him. A woman who posed as a very rich oligarch said she wanted to invest money, like hundreds of millions, into his campaign, but of course she wanted something in return. And now let's see a part of that video that we saw in this hotel room. We brought it with us.
Wenn Sie wirklich die Zeitung vorher übernehmen,
and we hope
wenn es wirklich vorher, in dieser Wahlperiode, 2-3 Wochen vorher, die Chance gibt, über diese Zeitung uns zu pushen, das wäre überhaupt nicht dann passiert ein Effekt, den die anderen ja nicht richtig halten. Nur warte, klar, das geht auf Ihrer Seite sagen, plus, das geht nur. Also schau, wenn das Medium 2-3 Wochen vor der Wahl plötzlich dieses Geld auf einmal uns pusht, ja, eben, dann hast du recht. Dann machen wir nicht 27, haben wir auch hier dabei. Ja, das geht auch noch so. Das haben wir genau. Sehen wir? Ja, und dann wie wir genau sehen. Nein, die Fakten ja tatsächlich und statistisch. Und bei so einem Thema, recht man. Aber ich muss trotzdem immer legal und mit unseren Programmen. Ja, okay, gut. Und das ist der Punkt, wo das klar abgestimmt wird. Hier die Idee, die war mit eure Idee legitim.
So the idea of this video was that this woman that you haven't seen here, because we took a part of where you only saw Mr. Strache, who was the one, very much in the front of the picture. You can see him now also. And if we move one ahead, then you can see some of the other persons who were involved there. But you can't see actually the oligarch for source protection reasons. That's what I'm going to say now. We also had always blacked her face out, kind of. So the idea was that she promised to buy the most important medium of Austria, the Zeitung, and would push him in the next election. And what she wanted in return was to make more money out of her money. And he was very open for that. And that was our big surprise. He promised her state contracts when she would help him. And he even said it may be possible overpriced, which means she would make more money and it would be not to the benefit of his country, to say at least. And but the problem was we met someone who set a video trap for someone else. And so when we were in this hotel room, we had to be afraid that maybe there was another trap set for us. So we had to be very cautious. And we discussed this in a podcast that we made later and published a year later in cooperation with FIO here in Germany. We had 9 episodes, and we are now hearing 2 minutes of one of those episodes where the two of us speak about exactly that problem.
Wir haben auch in diesem Moment ja damit rechnen müssen, dass jemand uns vielleicht eine Falle stellt. Dass dieses ganze Setup nicht nur seltsam war, weil es ein Wichtigtour ist oder weil es eben wichtig ist, sondern weil uns jemand reinlegen wollte damit. Und dass wir in diesem Moment gefilmt würden, nachdem ja offensichtlich schon andere heimlich gefilmt worden waren.
Und Frederik dachte auch sogar, dass das Schauspieler sind.
Damals wussten wir nicht 100%ig, dass es Herr Strache ist und Herr Gudenus. Wir wussten nicht, ob es womöglich sehr, sehr gut geschminkte Doppelgänger sind. Wir wussten auch nicht, ob das nicht womöglich sogar die beiden echt sind, aber sie ein großes Schauspiel aufführen, um eine Falle für Journalisten zu stellen. Wir wussten auch nicht, ob dieses Video womöglich manipulativ zusammengeschnitten worden ist.
Und deswegen machen Bastian und Frederik in dieser ersten Phase der Recherche auch keine Luftsprünge oder so. Sie staunen, sie sind aber noch verhalten. Und es ist natürlich immer dieser Hintergedanke da, ja. Wenn das alles stimmt, dann ist es eine Wahnsinnsgeschichte, aber eben nur wenn.
Es war also von vornherein so, dass es ganz offensichtlich war, und das haben wir dann auch sofort dort kundgetan, wenn wir darüber irgendwas machen, brauchen wir die Daten in die Hand. Wir müssen das Video selber haben, wir müssen es analysieren lassen und wir müssen es überprüfen lassen können. Und wir haben schon gesagt, wenn das alles stimmt, dann ist es eine Wahnsinnsgeschichte. Aber dieses Wenn ist für uns der entscheidende Faktor und deswegen irgendwie können wir jetzt noch nicht mal sagen, ob wir eine Geschichte machen würden und erst recht nicht wann und wie lange wir brauchen würden, sondern wir haben immer nur gesagt, sobald wir das in die Hand bekommen, können wir einen Plan erstellen.
So we were in the strange situation, knowing of a video that if it turns out to be authentic, could be explosive. But how do you check and verificate a video that you don't have in your hands? Because we only saw that video in the hotel. So what could we do? We did double check as much as we could, because of course we had written down as much as possible that what we have seen, what we have heard in that video. So what we did is we checked and double checked that. It starts with the simple stuff. was Mr. Strache and Gudenius in Ibiza at all at that time. Then, as you have seen, Mr. Strache is smoking a lot in this video. And you should know that Mr. Strache is has an on-off relationship when it comes to cigarettes. So we had to check if at that point in time he was smoking at all. And he was. So that was the easiest one. Then we checked, of course, names that he mentioned, activities that he mentioned in that video, deals that he mentioned. And then finally, we were able to get hold of the video itself. And that's when it already started, the real work started for us. Because before we already had spoken with colleagues in Austria, for example, with whom we have a long-standing relationship with the magazine Der Falter, and we already heard from them that they also have heard rumors before that there must be such a video. So when we got hold of the video, we started the real verification process. We, for example, we hired a professional translator, translator that is normally used to translate in German courts, and we asked her to translate the parts of the video that are in Russian. We then, of course, needed a translator. I mean, we are coming from the south of Germany. We understand a little bit what they say in Austria, but not everything. So, of course, we brought in colleagues who understand Austrian. We brought in a real-born Austrian, Leila Al-Sarori, and she found so many more stuff, heard more stuff that we would have missed without her. We then also we hired a forensic expert, an expert who is normally used to state in court as a witness if he thinks that a surveillance video is real, if a person on a surveillance video is really that person that is now on trial. So he checked the video and he came to the conclusion that at least the video is, in his opinion, authentic, that it was not manipulated at any parts. But there was still the one question. Is it really Mr. Strache? Is it really Mr. Gudenius? We knew those politicians only from videos, from press photos. But I personally have never met him, neither did Bastian. And we are all living in a world of deep fakes where you can manipulate a video, for example, of Mr. Obama saying something about Mr. Trump that he would never say, at least not in public. So how could you prove that it was really them? So when we came to that forensic expert, he asked us a simple question. Do you have pictures and photos of their ears? And we were like, what? Of their ears? Are you sure that you are the one expert that everybody recommended to us? And he was like, yes, an ear is like a fingerprint. So he asked us for photos of the ears of Mr. Strache from the front, from the side, from the back, and compared it with what he saw on the video and came to the conclusion that it is, in his opinion, definitely them because it matches as a fingerprint.
So finally, we had the video. After more than a year of waiting and hoping and well, we didn't beg, but we were really trying hard to convince our sources that we were the right persons and the right outlet as Süddeutsche Zeitung to receive the video. But then we had to realize that we were not alone anymore. We had to realize that they had already also spoken with Der Spiegel, which is like our main competitor in Germany. It's a weekly magazine, and we don't really like each other because they are having the scoops that we want to have, and we are having the scoops that they want to have. So usually, you know, there's a fierce competition between us. But in this case, we had the sense that we really wanted to avoid a rat race, as we call it in Germany. You know, that we tried to be, you know, faster with this story, publish before they did. So we thought about it, and then we gave him a call. And it was a really strange phone call because we had to act like we had to say, well, we are working on this story about a video that has to do with Austria and with an island, and I think you know already what I'm speaking about. And the guy on the other side was like, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. And then we agreed that we would form a cooperation on this topic exclusively, nothing else, but we would work together and we would share our secrets, and we would try to find calm and, related only to the issue, a way to publish it once we get it a hold. There was a couple of months before we really got it in our hands. Then we had another problem, because the one thing was the language, the dialect, the Viennese, as Frederik mentioned, was kind of difficult to understand for us. But then also we needed to know more about the law and about the persons, and so we needed a partner in Austria. So we invited der Falter from Vienna to Munich to work with us. And Florian Klenk, the editor-in-chief and a very renowned investigative journalist himself, he came to Munich, and we sat down in our offices and we watched the 7-hour-long video that we had received. And it was, I think for him, it was like one of the moments of his life that he will not forget, because it was his country and his vice chancellor that he saw in Ibiza behaving like someone in the next bar and, selling half of the country to some Russian oligarch that wasn't even a Russian oligarch, but whatever. So he helped us a lot with the fact checks, because those guys are reporting and investigating Heinz-Christian Strache there for many years. He used to be a neo-Nazi and then a politician, so they know him, they know a lot about him, and one member of the Austrian team, she even wrote a biography about him. So that was very helpful. But they also could explain the legal implications of, for example, when Strache offered the Russian oligarch that she could give donations, but that the regulatory authority doesn't have to know about that, which is just plain against the law, but not very clear from a standpoint in Germany. So we worked with the Falter very hard, like for a week, day and night, until we had all the last checks done, all the verifications done, and were positive. We had, of course, approached Mr. Strache and Mr. Gudenus. They said they were a little drunk and they couldn't remember a lot more. And so we pushed the publish button. And what happened immediately on the next day, that you can see on the next slide also, is that the government exploded. Mr. Strache had to step back on the very next morning after we published. And Mr. Kurz, the then and now again Chancellor, he called for snap elections. So that was that about Mr. Strache's future.
And it was another chapter, in my opinion, in the history of journalism that proved that we are living in a time, in a new era of journalism. We leave behind the era of the lonely wolf journalists in investigative journalism, and we move to an era of the power of the pack, where journalists team together, they team up across borders, across media borders, to investigate stories of immense public interest. When it comes to collaborations, we at Süddeutsche Zeitung have a several year-long history now and experience, because we have a long-standing relationship with two public broadcasters here in Germany, with NDR and WDR, and together with them we are teaming up for bigger projects, for bigger investigations, where we think that it's important to not only one group investigating a topic, but also different groups, TV, radio, print, together. When it comes to international projects, Bastian and I, our first international collaboration was offshore leaks. So that was our investigation about tax havens, about the offshore industry, that was published in 2013. And then several years after that publication, we got what I would in those days or nowadays call a present. A whistleblower had approached us and offered us material from a financial service provider called Mossack Fonseca. And this offshore service provider was already renowned for doing business with shady figures all around the world, but it was only rumors. And what we now had in our hand was 2.6 terabyte of data from a whistleblower calling himself John Doe. And we decided to share this data. We decided to share it with 400 journalists all around the world, organized and brought together by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, because we saw that there's so many traces in this data that we ourselves as German journalists would never be able to investigate in a lifetime. We also saw scandals that, if we are honest, would be a rather small article in a German newspaper, but it could be a very big headline in a newspaper or a TV show of countries on other continents. So we decided that it would be in the public interest to share the material, to work together with other journalists around the world and give them the possibility to work with us in the data. But if I emphasize now the public interest, I must also say it was in our interest to share the data. And I think that's something we should always keep in mind when we speak about collaborations in journalism. If you work together, you share a risk. It's not only me and Bastian being at risk because we have something in our hand, data where we know that it's organized crime figures in there. It's one of the best friends of Vladimir Putin in there, the cousin of Bashar al-Assad of Syria. But we knew that if we share the data, you would never be able to stop this investigation. Because if it were only the two of us, you could do harm to us. But if you share data with 400 journalists all around the world, you can never stop such a project. Furthermore, let's face the facts, it sure worked. What other colleagues do and investigate, that's work that we do not have to do or that we only have to double check. Furthermore, it's them bringing in expertise that we would never be able to learn. For example, our colleague in Iceland, we saw the prime minister at that time of Iceland in the data. And we must admit, or let's make it my confession, not our confession, I have never heard of that guy before. But our colleague Johannes Christiansson from Iceland, he of course had heard about that politician, and he had investigated him for years. So it was tremendously helpful to have him in such a project with his expertise. When you share work, we are able to do by far more stories. We did several calculations how long it would take us to investigate the whole Panama Papers. And the whole Panama Papers means us working our whole lives. And that's what Panama Papers are interesting, but that wasn't the plan. And there's also something that I didn't realize at the beginning, but that I now realize. You have by far bigger impact. When we decided, or we together with our bosses decided to share the Panama Papers, we had colleagues who asked us if we are, I'm not sure if they used stupid, crazy, or something like that, to share a scoop. Us giving away something that we as Süddeutsche Zeitung could have on our own. It's like us giving away a piece of the cake. Now I realize, yes, we gave away a little piece of the cake, but by bringing in others, they brought other ingredients to the cake. So the cake was by far bigger. So giving away a piece of this cake was only a small crumb, but our piece was in the end by far bigger than the original cake. But to make such an investigation a success and not a rat race against each other, again, one media outlet against another media outlets, you need rules.
And as we all like cake, at least I do, no one likes rules, especially not journalists. So, and you all know how it is to work with one journalist or two, and how difficult that can be. We had 400 of them, 400 colleagues around the world, and it was really a problem because we needed to make sure that we all can publish the way we wanted to publish. And once we started to get in the many colleagues, first 50, then 100, then 200. We were kind of sure that we would, lose the one or the other story along the way, because, the best way to get the best kept secret of a journalist is to buy him 2 beers. He is going to tell you what he's working on, because he's so proud on it. So what we needed to manage, we needed to get behind the egos of the persons that we're working with. One way is the concept of radical sharing. Whatever one of us found, one of our group, he immediately shared in the forum, which was like an internet Facebook for journalists, Facebook for investigative journalists, where you can make new posts about your findings, and you can like posts, and you can comment posts, and that worked really fabulous. The next thing that we had to make the people clear is that they really had to shut up. And if they needed to speak or write someone, they needed to encrypt. And that was, easy said, but hard done. It's now 5 years ago, and since we started the project 6 years ago, and well, encryption was not as a daily routine as it's now with, for example, encrypted services like Signal, or even WhatsApp is nowadays encrypted. Back then there was, very little opportunity, but we had to insist on that. Then also, we were working with colleagues worldwide, so we had to create awareness for cultural differences. Colleagues in Italy are completely different in their methods than colleagues in Germany and colleagues in Southern America or in Africa or in Australia. So we really had to take that into account, and we really had to give us all the benefit of the doubt. And then we had to create the awareness for different needs. TV have other needs, TV people, than radio, than print. I mean, we can just write it down on the last day. That's impossible for our TV colleagues. So we had to wiggle around that. And then also, and that may sound strange now, we had to tell everyone that we need to be transparent as soon as someone involved has a conflict of interest. What does that mean? We had one colleague, she found her boss in the Panama Papers. So that's a problem for her. But it's a problem that we need to be informed about. So we can speak and we can find a way around that, and how we still can publish that story. And so that no one can accuse us of, burying stories that we don't like and make stories speak that we do like. But well, and then it's very obvious we have to give each other credit. When I'm publishing a story about Iceland, for example, that Frederik mentioned, and a lot of reporting is done by our colleague in Iceland, I have to credit him. I have to name him in the article, and I have to say that part of the research is his and not only mine. And that works in both ways and around the world. And it was fantastic because we had so many pieces where we had colleagues from Ecuador, from Sweden, or from whichever country in our bylines, which is really a funny thing to have because it makes your paper so international from one second to the next. And I really like that. But the most important thing regarding publishing was that we all promised we would all publish on the same date, on the same time. And that's very important because if one of us had to be afraid that he or she would be scooped, that like, let's say The Guardian is, publishing their biggest stories 2 weeks ahead of everyone else, then why would you not go 1 week earlier? So this is like a race to the bottom. So we made everyone sign an agreement, a memorandum of understanding that says we all publish on the same date. And we thought that's fine. I mean, we can trust each other. And we built the trust through working with each other for a year. And not a single story left our small collaboration. But then in the last weeks, our lawyers, you know how lawyers are, our lawyers came up to us and said, hey guys, we would like to have a look at the contracts because we want to know what can we do if someone scoops us with our material that we shared, with the many colleagues in the world. And so they looked at the contract, and then they came back to us and they say, well, there's nothing we can do, aside from really hating those people who scoop us. But we know we can't find them, we can't sue them, it's just nothing. It's just, they are journalists. They can decide when they want to publish their story. And that's how journalism should be, honestly. So we had to have this big trust. And to our huge surprise, it worked. The team spirit prevailed over the egos. And this is why the Panama Papers was such a huge success. As we can see, here is like some images of the headlines around the world. I think we have another part of that. No, this is when we published, there were mass demonstrations around the world that you just saw in the other picture that I swiped away. I'm sorry. So around the world, people hit the streets and expressed their anger about what we told them. And we had, the head of state of Iceland had to step down, and later the head of state of Pakistan went to jail for what we found. And so there were many revelations. I think we had alone 5,000 stories that originated out of the Panama Papers around the world. So 5,000 different stories. And I think we may know about 1/3 of them, maybe a little more. But this is really, it's been astonishing, and it's been one of the big adventures of our lives. That's it.
Thank you so much. Frederik and Bastian, please come over and have a seat over here. Thank you so much for this this input. This is, I have to say, it's impressive, yeah, and it's very nice of you to share this, especially how many aspects are in there involved over the couple of years. We have opened up the chat, so if you have some questions for Bastian and or Frederik, just let us know. It's quite funny because the first question in there will be about money, actually. But first of all, let me say, because there's a question in the chat, the podcast is called Going to Ibiza. Is that right? That's the title of the podcast, Going to Ibiza. Yeah. Is that quite, let's start there, because this is like a conference for audio documentary makers. Is it common for the Süddeutsche Zeitung to pursue this line of medium, to say, well, look, we have a big research, we do this as an audio production as well at the moment?